Naru has not had a drink since yesterday morning. Her lips have split. Her head is pounding in time with her pulse. She has stopped sweating, which sounds like relief, and is actually the opposite. It is the first sign that her body has started closing valves it cannot afford to close. Somewhere behind her ribs, a clock is running out. And Naru is not running. She is not scanning the horizon for a shimmer of blue. She is on her knees, in a stretch of riverbed so dry that the sand puffs into dust when she touches it. A place that, to your eyes and mine, looks like the last place on earth you would stop. She is digging. In about half an hour, she is going to drink. Not because she got lucky, because she knew where to dig before she ever set out this morning. She was carrying a map. It just was not on paper. Naru is not a real person. She is a stand-in for a few 100,000 years of real ones. And the way she found water is quietly one of the most underrated pieces of knowledge our species ever built. Start with the brutal arithmetic. You can survive about 3 weeks without food. Without water, you get about 3 days. And in open desert heat, that number collapses. Half a day of hard walking under a high sun can cost you several liters. Lose around 1/10 of your body's water and you stop thinking clearly. Lose more and you stop. Full stop. Food is a problem you can solve slowly. Water is a problem you solve today, or you do not solve anything else ever again. This single fact shaped almost everything about how ancient people lived. It decided where they slept, how far they hunted, when they moved, who they married, how big a group could get before it had to break apart. Water was a leash, and every ancient human on the planet spent their entire life at the end of it. You can see it in the ground. Go to almost any major Stone Age site. Olduvai Gorge, the Levantine Corridor, the Kalahari, the Australian interior. You will find it sitting on a lake edge, a spring, an old river channel. Archaeologists do not treat this as a coincidence. It is closer to a rule. But here is where it gets interesting. Because most of the places ancient humans lived did not have a river running past the front door. They had a dry season, and the dry season is where the real skill shows up. Naru's first tool for finding water is not a tool at all. It is everything else that is thirsty. Every large animal in a landscape has the same problem she does. And unlike Naru, they have been solving it in the same place for generations. Game trails do not wander. They converge. Follow enough of them downhill and they braid together into one path. And that path goes somewhere. Birds are even better. Most seed-eating birds have to drink every single day. Their diet is dry, and there is no way around it. And they do it on a schedule. Heavy, direct, low flights toward water in the early morning and again before dark. In the Australian deserts, the zebrafinch is documented as one of the most reliable water indicators there is. A flock of finches flying flat and fast at dusk is not a nice piece of scenery. It is a bearing. Then there is the vegetation. Certain trees will not grow unless their roots can reach a water table. Reeds mean saturated ground. A hard green line of growth cutting across dead scrub means water is sitting under the surface, close enough to touch. None of this tells Naru where a lake is. It tells her something better. It tells her where the water underneath is close enough to reach. Which brings us to the digging. A dry riverbed is a lie. The surface is dust, but a meter down, in the coarse sand of the channel, water is still moving. Slowly, invisibly, held in the gaps between the grains. The river did not disappear. It went underground and kept going. This is what Naru is digging for.
And the technique used to get at it is one of the most elegant things I have come across in any survival literature. Among the sand of the Kalahari, it is called a sip well. You dig down until the sand turns damp. You pack a bundle of dry grass into the bottom of the hole, You push a long, hollow reed down into that bundle. Then, and this is the part that sounds wrong, you fill the hole back in and pack it tight. Now, you suck on the reed. You are not sucking up water. There is no puddle down there. You are pulling a partial vacuum through packed sand, and moisture held in the grains condenses out onto the grass bundle. It takes patience. Your cheeks ache. And then, the reed goes cold in your mouth, and water comes. A second reed can be used to blow it back up into a container so that nothing is wasted. Think about what that requires. You have to understand that sand holds water, that grass will pull it out, that sealing the hole is the thing that makes it work. That is not instinct. That is engineering, taught by somebody to somebody over and over for a very long time. The sip well is one option in a ranked list. The anthropologist Richard Lee, who spent years living with sand groups in the Kalahari, described exactly this: a hierarchy of water sources, ordered by reliability. The permanent water holes at the top, then the seasonal ones, then the emergency ones. Ancient people did not have a water source. They had a portfolio, and they knew which line of it they were on at any given moment of the year. Further down that list, things get strange. In the Australian deserts, granite outcrops hold natural rock basins. Rainwater collects in them and can sit there for months. But an open basin evaporates and animals foul it. So Aboriginal groups covered them. Sticks and leaves laid over the narrow openings, cutting the evaporation and keeping the animals out. Sit with that for a second. That is not finding water. That is maintaining it.
That is infrastructure, built by people with no permanent settlement, on rocks they might not return to for a year. Below that, there is water pooled in tree hollows, water squeezed out of the shallow roots of desert eucalypts, dug up and drained. Dew wiped off the grass at dawn with a bundle of feathers or bark and wrung out. And at the very bottom of the list, when everything else is gone, there is the frog. The Australian water-holding frog spends the dry years buried underground in a cocoon of its own shed skin, carrying water that can make up something like 60% of its body weight. Aboriginal people located them by reading marks on the ground surface and by tapping. Dig it up, squeeze gently, drink. And then the frog goes back in the hole, alive. That is a last resort water source with a maintenance policy attached to it. Now, the real question: Naru knew where to dig. How? Because none of this works if you were discovering it in the moment. By the time you were desperate enough to look for water, you were too dehydrated to look properly. The knowledge has to arrive before the thirst does. So it was carried. In memory, in songs, in stories, in routes walked with elders as a child, until the sequence of soaks and rock holes and shaded pools was as familiar as the layout of your own hands. Occasionally, it got physically recorded. There was a documented example from Western Australia of a water map. The region's water sources, rendered in a stylized form, carved into the back of a spear thrower. A survival database, cut into a hunting tool. This was the single most valuable thing a group owned. Not the tools, not the shelter, the knowledge of where the water is, in what order, in what season, and critically, the knowledge of who else had the right to use it. And a quick honest note here, because it matters. The San and the Aboriginal Australians I have been describing are living peoples with their own long histories.
They are not fossils, and they are not a window into how our ancestors lived. The reason they appear in this video is that their water techniques are documented, testable, and physically possible with Stone Age equipment, which tells us what was available to people in the deep past. That is a different claim, and a more careful one than saying this is what the Stone Age looked like. Finding water solves today. Carrying it is what lets you go somewhere. And we have the containers. At Deep Kloof Rock Shelter in South Africa,
Archaeologists recovered 270 fragments of ostrich eggshell dating to roughly 60,000 years ago. Some of the pieces show deliberately punched openings, the same technique used to turn an ostrich egg into a flask. Hole in the top, contents emptied out, refilled with water, sealed with beeswax. The fragments represent at least 25 separate containers. And they are engraved, not scratched, engraved in repeating standardized patterns, hatched bands, parallel lines, a style that shifts consistently through the layers over thousands of years. We do not know for certain what the marks meant. In more recent Kalahari use, decoration on these flasks has signaled ownership or what is inside, which, if it holds, means those may be labels on water bottles 60,000 years old. There is one more detail. Sand groups filled ostrich eggshells, sealed them, and buried them at known points along their hunting routes. Not one bottle, a chain of them, hidden across a landscape, retrievable months later by anyone who knew the spots. That is not a container. That is a supply network. Here is the part I do not want to sell you a fairy tale about. Ancient people had no idea that water carried disease, no germ theory, no microscopes, no way of knowing that the thing that killed the child last summer was something alive and too small to see. What they had instead were proxies.
Moving water over still water, water with no smell, water that animals were visibly drinking, water pulled up through sand, which, as it happens, genuinely filters out a lot of the larger nasties, entirely by accident. Some of it worked. A sip well is legitimately safer than a stagnant pool, and they would have noticed the pattern even without knowing the reason. And some of it did not. Waterborne parasites are old companions of ours. Guinea worm has been found in ancient human remains, and it spreads through exactly this, through drinking standing water. A great deal of ancient suffering came out of a water source that looked completely fine. So the honest answer to the question in the title is that they did not find clean water. They found the least dangerous water available, using rules learned the hard way over generations by people who paid for those rules in lives. For most of our history, this was the deal. Water is fixed, you move. Then somebody broke it. On the west coast of Cyprus, at a site called Kisanerga, archaeologists found a shaft cut straight down through limestone, roughly 8 meters of it, reaching an aquifer. It dates to around 8,400 years before Christ. That is more than 10,000 years ago, and it was dug with stone tools by people who had no metal and no way to see what was underneath them. They did not find water. They went and got it. Similar wells turn up shortly afterwards, including a stone-lined one at Atlat Yam, a Neolithic village that now sits under the sea off the coast of Israel. This is a bigger moment than it looks. A well means you can put a village somewhere a village could not previously exist. It means you are not tied to the spring anymore. It means storage, permanence, ownership, and eventually the whole architecture of settled life. Fields, walls, cities, and every single argument human beings have had since then about who the water belongs to. Everything downstream of that starts with a hole in the ground on Cyprus. Back to Naru. She is still kneeling in the riverbed. The reed goes cold. She drinks a mouthful at a time, slowly, because she is not going to waste it. Then she fills the eggshell, seals it with wax, and covers the hole so the sun cannot take what is left. She will be back here. She knows the way. This morning, you turned a handle and clean water came out of a wall, and you thought about none of it. Not where it came from, not whether it would kill you, not whether you would remember the route back. Naru organized her entire life around the thing you did without noticing. Everything you know is built on top of somebody who had to work it out first.